We are back. Sam Seder, Emma Vigeland on the Majority Report. I want to welcome to the program. It's either Bhaskar or Bhaskar Sunkara. I was going to say, like, the amount of grief I took from Michael for not being able to pronounce like a wide range of names on this program and words, frankly, and still to this day. What was going on? Like, you guys were friends. Like, at one point, you must have said to him, like, it's not Bhaskar.
We had a conversation about it earlier, and I'm just like, just roll with it. But the thing is, he was a very personable person, so he wouldn't avoid your name. He would say, you know what I mean, Bhaskar. But it was an upgrade. I think early on it might have been Boxcar. So it got a little bit better, and I was willing to settle on that. It's fine. My family's mostly Trinidadian, so we're like the Cajun French of Indian people. We barely know how to pronounce our names. Like I should aspirate the H in my name, and I don't. So yeah, it was all fine.
All right. Well, it's funny to hear that the amount of grief that he gave me. So we're celebrating his 40th birthday, obviously. What is your sense of like what would he be doing now? I mean, obviously he'd still be doing, a TMBS. I know that you guys are working on a show as well. But more in the terms of like, where was the trajectory headed in terms of ideologically speaking?
So it's very obviously it's hard to say, and one wants to be careful, with someone who's not there to chart their own course. But it is interesting that Michael passed away right at the end of this kind of arc of really fast growth for our part of the left, the broad progressive left, but in particular the socialist left. And he kind of moved along with that left ideologically. By the end, he was a self-described socialist. He was very interested in Marxist, though he tried to bring in all this, Buddhist spirituality stuff, part of our often debates. I told him nothing good has ever come from the subcontinent, and he begged to differ. But so it is very, very hard to say, because he was there when there was a lot of energy and excitement around it. I would say that he became, at least in our conversations, and I think you see this in some of his material, a little critical of some of the existing left and the direction that things were going. But because he was always very mindful of moving along the base of people with him, I'm not sure he definitely, I don't think, would have succumbed to Jimmy Dorism or that sort of contrarianism on the left, or just kind of cynicism. I think he fundamentally believed in the project, and also I think he had a very materialist approach to the left, which is just like society as a whole is filled with lots of contradictions and good and bad, and we try to figure out a way to have one step in the mainstream society in order to actually reform it and to pull it in a better direction. With the existing left, it was the same thing. I dislike many parts of the orientation of the left on certain issues, the way we approach things, through our language, our rhetoric, or whatever else. But I always consider myself, a part of that left that's messy and filled with contradictions, and I think Michael did too. So I can't see him really being apart from that movement. But yeah, it's hard to say.
What do you think he most appreciated about, I guess, your work, but also just your interactions, from an ideological stand, not necessarily as a friend, but in the context of like of the work? Because I mean, he certainly didn't identify as a socialist until the late teens, as it were, and wasn't, I think, began to adopt, I feel like, some of those ideas, I think, largely after you guys started to talk more.
Yeah, I mean, I think he came to it a lot through his love of history. And there was a few countries where he actually spent a lot of time with a fairly deep engagement on, like in South Africa or Jamaica to some degree. There was other countries where he would just do a quick skim of 2 articles and then have a very funny but insightful kind of take on the country too. So I think kind of owing from having a sense of history, knowing that so many of these great figures and liberation movements that he knew about and thought could be inspirations for the left today, identified as socialists, was just as big of a role as the engagement with Jacobin. I think for good and bad reasons, the socialist left, and I think in particular people around Jacobin, like myself, probably more than now, had a sense of certitude, which is both a strength and weakness of the Marxist left. So I think being able to have a worldview that distilled really complex events and things into a framework, and explaining how this fit into a broader arc of history. I think that definitely played a role, but I think it was really his interest in the rest of the world and his interest in history that led him eventually to find kind of more of a homegrown American tradition. But he was obviously extremely invested in imparting to people knowledge about these struggles of the past, and had this like very eclectic intellectual and almost moral attachment to those movements.
If there was a sense of certitude in 2018, 2019, early 2020, where how would you characterize it now? Because there is a sort of like lost in the wilderness feel on some level, which is different than it was, let's say, 10, 12 years ago, where it was there's just wilderness. There's no entity that's lost so much, at least there feels like there's still sort of like a nascent burgeoning of like a legitimate left in this country, but it's lost.
Yeah, I think we thought we found a shortcut to, at the very least, social democracy, and if not, something more radical beyond social democracy, through the Bernie Sanders campaigns and through the mobilization of largely a group of young people, including many young workers that attached themselves to the Bernie campaigns, that were politicized by Occupy Wall Street, by Black Lives Matter. And I think there was really a sense that actually we're a movement that has very clear demands. Here's the top 5 immediate demands we stand for. Here's Medicare for all, the Green New Deal. There was a programmatic clarity. And there was serious discussions about the way in which a Bernie Sanders presidency can help galvanize movements on the outside, that can make these things more feasible and possible. So you had a goal and also kind of a theory of change, and then an ideological underpinning for it that was not as vague and amorphous as American progressivism was, which I think, I don't attack that generation of American progressives. I kind of grew up on anything I could get my hands on, the opposition to the Bush administration, and any sort of anything, like Anthony Weiner going on MSNBC talking about how bad our healthcare system is and how good Medicare for all would be. That was a moment, and that was something for a cynical high school student to hang on to. But I do think it was much more defined and more rigorous, and I think that was there. And now it just seems like we have this base of activists. We still have 70, 80,000 people in the Democratic Socialists of America. We have these wider networks. Jacobin is not quite at its peak. We peaked around 73, 74,000 subscribers, maybe at 60 now. And I think DSA had a similar drop from around 100,000 members. But there's still this steady base, when probably both organizations are not going to lose more supporters than that. But where does it go when it feels like you're being caught in a subculture that's both too large to completely disappear, but seemingly too small to have a real impact nationally? So I think now we have to figure out, well, if we don't have an immediate, okay, we're going to change the world in 5 years, how do we survive in organizations and content ourselves with smaller victories and still kind of have a vision of a radical transformation, even though we're mired in the muck of complex and contradictory, real real politics. And I think that's the challenge. So I like to think they're still the same goals, but the time horizons have just shifted. And right now it feels like our goal is just to stay alive for the next 5-10 years and wait for, something to happen in the background that'll allow us to be more useful as a socialist movement.
The challenge of those two sort of dual, I guess, mandates, staying somewhat vibrant and also celebrating sort of minor victories. Like, what constitutes a minor victory within the context of that movement?
Yeah, I think for one, victories include Bernie Sanders being one of the few politicians, along with other members of the squad, that have engaged in a lot of labor solidarity over the last couple of years and standing side by side with workers as they either go on strike in some cases or use a threat of strike to negotiate stronger contracts, like with the Teamsters recently. I think it means state level success, like you've had with socialist backed campaigns around public power in New York and elsewhere. And I think sometimes it just involves being voices of opposition against the status quo and keeping us distinct from the Democratic Party mainstream. And that's kind of the very difficult tension. How do we maintain an independent profile to the Democratic Party? And how do we say this is what democratic socialism is and this is how it's different, without losing sight of the fact that we would much rather be in opposition to the horrible centrists in the Democratic Party than to a semi-fascist right? And I think there's lots of things we have to grow up on, but to me, success means people knowing that there is a left alternative to this neoliberal consensus, and that it's the real opposition to it isn't coming from the Donald Trumps of the world, who did absolutely nothing for working people when in power, but from the left. And I think that was much more clear in 2016 than it is today.
Right. Insofar as if you have the opportunity to have a foil for these policies, you want it to, you want that argument to be with the center left, if you will, and from the left to the center left. That's where we want on the playing field, and we want to sort of the fascists, I guess, to be out trying to scalp a ticket.
Exactly. I love being in opposition to Hillary Clinton. It was probably the greatest, 8 months of my life. And then when Trump came, I think a lot of people were just on the defensive, and we were under attack from all sorts of quarters because they perceived any continual criticism of the Democratic Party as being fundamentally supporting Trump, indirectly.
How do you walk that line strategically? I mean, so for instance, just as an example, the Democratic Party was, played in some Republican primaries by, writing an ad like Doug Mastriano is too conservative for Pennsylvania. And then, of course, the Republican Party was like, oh, he's our man in that case. I mean, how much do you, as a socialist, if you want a certain, foil enemy, however it is, you want a certain opposition, which is going to highlight sort of like really the differences you want to highlight. How much do you, like, how far do you go or not go to sort of help that?
Yeah, I think that we just need to focus on our issues. So we need to focus on continuing to find a way to campaign for state level efforts of the Green New Deal and Medicare for All, and to continue to say the primary problem in the United States is the tremendous gap between the rich and the poor, and the starving of resources to poor and working class Americans. And I think sticking to that core economic message while still bringing in issues of oppression into that framework, I think is our way forward. Now, when it comes to tricky dilemmas like what do we do in November 2024, I think we need to separate what we should do as institutions and what we should do as individuals. Like, I myself have voted. My first election was 2008. I voted for Green Party in every single election, including for Cynthia McKinney, Jill Stein twice, Howie Hawkins. I'll probably vote Green again. next November, if I was in a swing state, I would vote for the Democratic Party. I would vote for Joe Biden. And I don't think that should be the matter of much controversy or discussion, just kind of a common sense thing, given what I know about the American political system. The real complicated thing is, what should the Democratic Socialists of America, for example, as an organization, what should the left do in bloc? How should Bernie Sanders spend his next year? And I don't think we should spend it campaigning for the president of the United States, the most powerful person on earth that has a huge party and infrastructure behind him. I think we should spend the time campaigning for our own issues and continuing to distinguish ourselves from both the center and right of American politics.
Anything else you want to mention? I think Michael would have enjoyed that. Anything else you want to mention on his what would have been, I guess, yesterday, his 40th birthday?
Yeah, I think one interesting thing about Michael that I was just thinking about recently was he was really big into self-improvement in a way that I openly, I don't think a lot of people on the left think about or do. I certainly don't. Like this, I have not been on in a long time. But, he, one would consider like meditation as a way to become better at his craft. He thought about his craft a lot in terms of not just what he was learning politically, but also his delivery, how to kind of be funny and better communicate his ideas. He would ask me to ruthlessly criticize his writing. And I would, we would just be meeting and chatting, and he'll say, hey, I'm going to send you over a couple pieces of writing. Can you tell me what's wrong with these pieces of writing? And I'll tell you what was wrong with your last appearance on my show. And then I'm like, well, I don't want to hear that. But he obviously, in his mind, obviously we were both trying to do the same thing. He was now trying to do more writing, which I was better at. And I was, appearing on these shows, which I never really loved these, formats compared to writing. And we both benefit from thinking about what we're doing right and what we're doing wrong, which is just very much common sense. But it's not something that I ever experienced in this world, because either one, people are not taking it seriously enough, what they're doing, but also they were too, people are often too insecure or otherwise too overly confident, that kind of, pendulum, to really think about what they're doing and criticize it and think about how it should be done in a different way. So there's that combination of having enough of an ego to want to present yourself well, but also having enough humility to see where you've went wrong, that I think we should all learn from in little ways.
That's really well said. I guess lastly, where do you think he would be sartorially at this point? I mean, Michael moved through a lot of
there's other people doing the Adidas tracksuits now.
Really?
Well, I got news for you. People were doing the Adidas tracksuit in the 80s too.
Yeah.
I mean, so.
But they stopped doing it for a while, and then Michael brought
Who's
it
the
back.
people?
Michael brought it,
We'll talk about that later.
Okay.
but what do you like? Where would he be? Because he went through a bunch of different stages very quickly, it seemed to me, in terms of clothing.
Yeah, I think British teens brought that back, and Michael was just one of the first in the US to pick up on it. I have no idea. I would remind him that he's becoming an older man and he should dress more conservatively, like you, for example, Sam.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yes,
you'd be a great style icon for him. I would be very curious to see what directions his impressions would go. It seems like this current Republican field, besides for Trump, just really doesn't lend itself to the type of parody that we've had. In the past.
I don't know how much
DeSantis,
time you spent watching DeSantis. Well, first of all, DeSantis I think
for sure DeSantis, but Vivek Ramaswamy just sounds like a bootleg.
Rhymes with cake.
Rhymes with cake.
Rhymes with cake. Have you not heard the freestyle?
I only heard the freestyle because I think Sam sent it to me. It took me a very long time to discover this.
Yeah.
But So I have no idea. Who knows how that brain worked and how the right-wing Mandela and other characters came to being.
I know how right-wing Mandela came to be. It was because
Rick
of
Santorum.
Rick Santorum.
So I did discover a bunch of random voicemail saved on my Dropbox, and I was like, why in the world am I saving voicemails on my Dropbox? Am I like looking to sue someone or blackmail someone? Like, and then I listened to them, and 3 of them were from Michael, and they were various. So one was Michael calling me as my father, asking me why I wasn't a doctor. My dad always tells me that when I was born, my grandfather said, he should either be a doctor or he could be anything he wants as long as he's a good football player. And obviously, I was just soccer, and obviously, right. I'm neither. So I told Michael a version of that, and then he riffed on that. So I had that. I had various other ones that might be too hot for this for this venue, but I'm going to go through them and see if any are like PG-13 enough, and maybe share them with the world, because some of them were original contributions, not very heavily produced. Like I think Ben says that his the thing he was talking about was this is just answer my phone call and I'm going to leave a voicemail so you feel like it's an urgent thing. But
that's funny. Well, please keep us informed of those releases. Bhaskar Sunkara, always a pleasure. Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Take care.
Thank you.